Spend some time on slugs for sure. And thanks for coming all the way from Fairbanks. That's a nice, easy commute with this Zoom thing. Any other questions to start out, or what you're growing, or where you are?
See, Avery says we're in South Anchorage, try to grow a little of everything in a limited space. I like to grow a mix of annuals, perennials, and some veggies. I'm curious how to rid my plants of aphids and slugs without using harmful pesticides. We got Tabitha joining in from Chugiak.
Ooh, cool. All righty. Well, here we go. So I'm Ellen Vandevis. I run a business called Good Earth Garden School, in which I give away all kinds of free information on my website, which is goodearthgardenschool.com. But it's never as good as talking with you, so here we go. But it is a place to check out free resources, and you can easily download all these giveaways. We'll concentrate on pests today. If we get to it, we'll talk about weeds and disease, but the organic approach. So we're lucky we don't have cabbage loopers or the Colorado potato beetle or the squash vine borer or the plum curculio, at least not yet. In Alaska, we mostly have aphids and whiteflies, flea beetles, cutworms, root maggots, thrips, and moose. So when you see something like this, you pull up your onions and, ooh, they're just crawling. Yike, icks. Is your first instinct, I want to kill it. How do I kill it? I'm going to spend some time helping us think about pest panic. It is so easy to get historical because you've raised these seeds. They're like your children, and it seems like an attack, and oh my gosh, kill it. The truth is, if you're raising healthy plants in healthy soil, you really don't have that many problems. Sometimes you do. Slugs will love your plants, of course, but plants are constantly giving out signals in order to protect themselves. And the songbirds are helping you by opening the leaf, I spelled it wrong, leaf stomata. Ants stimulate healthy plant functions. Bee vibrations stimulate more plant sugar production. So you're going to want to aim for a lot of diversity around your garden, in your garden. And plants are calling for help as they need them. They have ways to signal predator insects up to 20 meters away. And they have two different kinds of signals that we know about, and there's probably more. We're just learning how to investigate this stuff. One signal is, come right away, I need predators. Another signal is, come in a few days, we can see that this is developing here. But if you're saying, just this once, I'm spraying, I don't want that guck. You get into a game called Toxic Chemical Rescue. And the more pesticides you apply, the more pests you have, even though that seems counterintuitive. What happens with non-organic pesticides? First of all, they're persistent. They don't break down readily, and they're going to hang around and hang around and hang around and even bioaccumulate in plant tissues of birds, predator bugs, and you. And they're broad spectrum. They kill everything. Your soil microorganisms, your predators, your favorable bugs. They kill the soil life. They're hazardous to our health. They accumulate up to 70,000 times as they work their way up the food web, with one thing eating another to the top of the food web. And the endocrine disrupting means just tiny amounts can fool with our tiny amounts of endocrines in our body and those of birds and other predators. and they're circulating globally and continuing to be hazardous or toxic. So I'm encouraging you to check your attitude. Kill it versus curiosity. Can you get a little curiosity going instead? Just to arrest that feeling of, you're eating my babies. What's its purpose? The native way of it's a gift, all is gift from the Creator. What are the benefits? What is the purpose in the whole food web? And can we coexist? So on the left, we have a beetle, and there's a spider, and there's some wasps. You have to kind of check your emotions and go, what's that doing to my behavior? We have this thing about bacteria. Oh my gosh, sterilize, kill microorganisms. Yikes, that causes disease. Not necessarily. Spiders, bugs, fungi. Checking your own chest there. How are you doing for reactiveness? The experts tell us for every one pest, there are 17,000 non-pests. Conventionally grown corn, for example, has 10 times more pests than ecologically grown corn. In other words, the more pesticides you use, the more pests come. So if you apply a toxic chemical, you're encouraging pest resistance, and then they mutate, and then they adapt, and then you see more pests. So you apply more pesticide, and then the insect becomes immune. It mutates. Their life cycles are shorter. They can handle this, and then you apply a different pesticide, and then the weed or insect mutates, and then you put a stronger one on, and then the pest becomes immune, and then you escalate this warfare. You've not really addressed the real root cause of the problem, but you've spent a lot of money and risked your health. So I call it a treadmill. There's the pest, the pesticide, mutation, resistance, more pests, more pesticides. It's a hard thing to get off. And the companies know that they can get you on this by stoking up your fear, stoking up your reactions, offering you this cheap solution, just spray it or drench it, and they profit off your soil sickness, actually, because they never talk about, well, nutrition would save you a lot of this. And then where do the pesticides go? Oh, down into your soil, off into the air currents, into surface water, down into groundwater, into the food web. And I want to alert you to some of the main ones that you can buy at any old store. Roundup, 2,4-D, Enlist Duo by Dicamba, yeah, I have trouble pronouncing neonicotinoids. I came close, and atrazine. Roundup is, the active ingredient is glyphosate. 2,4-D is the active ingredient in Agent Orange used to defoliate Vietnam vegetation. Enlist Duo is that answer of, gee, since glyphosate is getting a lot of bugs and weeds, in this case, mutated, and we have super weeds, well, we'll add another to it. So they combine glyphosate and 2,4-D to make a stronger herbicide. Dicamba is another name to avoid the neonics and atrazine. And just back to neonics for a minute, there's some that are so persistent that if they're sprayed on a hayfield for weeds, and say a horse eats the hay and poops, and then you compost the manure that's gone all the way through the digestive system, and you use that compost in your garden, it's still got toxic active chemicals in it that kill your crops. It's an herbicide that's terribly persistent. So we've said, yeah, we cause resistant strains. We get super bugs and super weeds that can mutate and live right on. We hit non-target organisms. The persistency is very long lasting by a magnification. And then if your neighbor's spraying, it can drift onto your crops, which harm yours. This stuff can get in groundwater. It can get in the air. We're all breathing it. We have less insects in general today than when I was growing up. You took a trip and your windshield would be full of dead bugs. Now you hardly have to wash your windshield on a road trip. So with the cancer causing and all of these threats, what percentage do you think our food has, let's say that differently. Pesticides are in what percent of our food? If you would just test a whole bunch of foods, what do you think? Go ahead and type it in or unmute and shout it out. Any feedback, Brooke?
I was on mute. Okay, let's see. So we've actually had a few people chiming in, just letting you know where they're from. We've got somebody from Juneau. We have somebody from Wasilla that says they have more than tons of slugs after midsummer, have lots of aphids in early spring. While I'm trying to get my starts going, we've got John here saying last year we had heavy aphid infestation with Siberian kales. Never had them in 20 years. Use a mesh cover, question mark. We've got a couple other people. We've got some in Soldotna with a huge slug problem. And then we've got Liz saying 80%, Zara saying 90, Liz is saying 92, Mary's saying 90, and John's saying 75%.
Ooh, good guesses. And welcome, all you people from all over. This is great. Thanks for coming.
Sorry, I had somebody was calling me, and that's why I didn't respond right away. So I do apologize.
You're a doer of all things there at Alaska Mill and Feed.
We're trying.
So those of you who guessed were pretty darn close. Yeah, studies are showing 98% of our food. So you're striving to eat organic, but there's all this drift coming in that is still around. And you think that the United States Department of Ag is supposed to test for these things like 2,4-D, glyphosate, and atrazine, but it does not. But we were led to believe, well, if these chemicals aren't safe, they wouldn't be allowed on the market. We have testing and regulations. And it's not true. There's too much of chemical companies then putting their people on the boards and on the commissions and on the regulatory agencies. And if you look at who's the Secretary of Agriculture, this is somebody who works for Monsanto or has been. So it's a revolving door, and they have endangered us and our safety by excluding certain testing. So when we thought these are rigorously tested and they'll break down, pesticides are essential, that's not true. We're getting bombarded with a lot of advertising and a lot of falsehoods. So just looking at glyphosate, geez, I'd like to kill those weeds. Oh, it's safe as water, says the company. But the World Health Organization says a probable carcinogen, and the state of California has just flat out said it is carcinogenic. Causes leaky gut. Little things are replicating in your gut. There's bioaccumulation, increased cancer cells, tumors, affects fish livers, endocrine disruption. So this information comes from citizen groups and scientists who are doing independent research, as opposed to the government agencies that have eroded our trust. The Organic Consumers Association, the Institute for Responsible Technology, and the Center for Food Safety, and investigative reporters are giving us this information. They're finding that the industry does its own research. It suppresses other research. It gives fake research. It stuffs cabinets at all levels, particularly the United States EPA and USDA. And then there's bullies who try to mask over true information. So we said that glyphosate is an example of one that causes weeds to mutate. How many kinds of weeds do you think are now resistant to continual Roundup applications? Just take some guesses here. And Brooke, are you there?
I am here. So let's see. We've got Zara saying 90%. Liz is saying 100%. Those are the only two guesses I'm seeing so far.
There's some 65 kinds, and this was 3-4 years ago. 65 kinds of weeds have become super weeds, and they're resistant. So if a farmer is depending on spraying with Roundup, those super weeds will keep right on growing in spite of dousing with heavier and heavier applications. So the industry says, well, then use more, or use 2 kinds of herbicides, pour it on. And then the glyphosate gets in our soil, our air, our water. How much? Well, in the soil, 1 billion pounds per year. In the air, 86% of samples, and that's probably in the summer on each continent, whether they're being heavily applied. And in water, 77% of rain samples. So that's affecting all kinds of birds, bees, humans, and other insects. So we've talked about Roundup and 2,4-D and Enlist Duo dicamba. The neonicotinoids is our next topic here. It's a seed coating for one thing. Put it on a seed, and then maybe you won't get a fungus getting that newly emerged seedling and killing it. But a single corn kernel coated with a neonic can kill a songbird. Even a tiny amount of wheat can fatally poison a bird. We got rid of DDT. How do neonics compare? They're 10,000 more toxic to bees. So that's why all the Save Our Bees campaign, these should not be put into our food web. We're so dependent on bees for all of our agriculture. So we're causing an ecocide here. All of this makes you ask, why did we think it was such a good idea to grow our foods with poisons? That's what Jane Goodall coined here. We got the rescue treadmill. The more we use them, the more we have to use them, and the less effective they are. And they're very costly, and they're rather addictive. So it's a vicious cycle. How do we get into a virtuous cycle instead? Rachel Carson wrote the book Silent Spring. she's teaching us to ask, are we killing what we intended? So these are the questions we ask ourselves as organic and sustainable gardeners. Are we killing what we intended? Oh, what else are we harming? Like salmon downstream? And why is a chemical innocent until proven guilty? So your question is, if I don't use any sprays, how do I ward off pests, disease, and weeds? The other thing to keep in mind is you will accomplish pest management, but you will never accomplish pest control. Even with the harsh chemical herbicides, you'll never control them because they will mutate, develop immunity, and live on. So we step back into our humility of, ooh, we're one part of a food web in an ecosystem in creation, and we can do a little fiddling with pest management, but in the end, we don't have order, control, and power like we would wish we had. So I'm going to talk about prevention first, because that's the very best way to spend your time. Second, if you have to treat, how can you treat organically? So you want to make the switch, or at least improve what you're already doing if you're already doing sustainable and organic methods. Observe, 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 and imitate nature. What is going on? The second one I have here is balanced soil nutrients. If you've heard any of my talks, I go on and on about how to balance soil nutrients and how to make healthy soil, because this is the basis for everything. I teach a course at Matsu College, a 6-week, every Friday class on all of this. So you know what you can do. It's so, so important. Just like you don't get as sick as all your friends if you are keeping up on your healthy diet and avoiding sugar and have plenty of good healthy food going into you. You have all the building blocks your immune system needs to resist disease. All right, calm down, Ellie, and try to go to the next topic here. Rotate crops, that's really beneficial. Encourage biodiversity by planting lots of different things and mix them up. Use prevention first, and then choose the non-toxic methods. So we want to do least harm and recognize that food web is so complex. You have a lot of weapons, if you want to use that warlike term. You just have to think, who else am I killing that I didn't mean to? So if you have some bugs nibbling, you shouldn't conclude that this is a big problem. Picking off some by hand is probably all you need, but let's look at some examples. How about this one? Is this a problem? What do you think? Yes? No?
Looks like a problem to me. What is it? I don't know. Let's see, I don't have anybody chiming in yet.
They're so tiny and probably not widespread in the whole patch. So this could be one little hatch of something that's interesting but doesn't really make a huge impact. How about this? Gonna sting your kids, buzz around, hurt you, sting you?
We've got a lot of no's coming through.
Oh! Well, I have a smart bunch of people on this call.
Yes,
You're
you
exactly
do.
And that's because it's a syrphid fly. It is not a wasp. It is not a hornet. On the left is a wasp, paper wasps, and it's, if you can count their wings, it's a different. Flies have two wings, and bees have an extra set of wings there. Hoverflies or syrphid flies. So you're right. They eat aphids as well as pollinate. And then I get emails like this. Is that a problem? What do you think, gang?
Somebody said a gall?
Exactly. Yeah. Interesting, fascinating thing in nature, but not a harm to your garden at all. Just an occasional interesting thing. And then there's that beetle on the left. Harm, help.
Someone said help.
How? Anybody know? It's a burying beetle. If you see them around, they're not going to chew down your plants. They're actually stirring your soil and mixing it a little bit, working in your fertilizers and moving beneficial microbes from here to there as they burrow and bury. Very useful friend. So if you find something you're curious about, you can take it into the Cooperative Extension Service. From now through October, there's a pest scout who knows all about this stuff. You take in your sample with your name and your phone number on it. I believe the base is the Cooperative Extension Service office at the experiment farm, the UAF experiment farm, near Palmer on just off the Trunk Road. So keep in mind you have a pest scout. Or you can send a photo into spiders. Oh, you want to slap them down, but they are good predators. So in other words, bugs can be good guys. 17,000 compared to the one pest in a ratio. So I'm asking you to be as curious as you can, as rational as you can. Try not to let your emotions swat and kill. And forget eradication. It will never happen. You're going to still have some of those slugs. So we're going for prevention first. We want to be holistic. We want to be long-term, life-affirming, ongoing, preventive. And we want to get out of that war mentality, me versus you. And suddenly gardening is not fun when you're thinking, oh, I'm so mad at those slugs, aphids, you fill it in. So watch it that it doesn't become a battle. So the author of The Myth of Safe Pesticides says we can effectively control all pests with organically allowed natural controls. There's no need for toxic synthetic pesticides. That is quite a statement. So you want to stop the cause of the problem and do the prevention and long-term balance, especially with your soil. So we'll talk about that for just a moment, but it's kind of a whole nother subject here that I would love to go on and on about, but I promise not to. If you're going to build whole, balanced, nutrient-rich soil, first of all, don't get so over-nurturing that you want to pour on everything on the shelf. A soil test helps you to figure out what you need, and being a reader of labels, turn the box over, turn the jug over, read the label. How much do I apply on the average? That will help you get some good nutrients in there so there's minerals availability, but not too much, because too much will screw you up. Just to dramatize, too much phosphate will tie up zinc. Too much phosphate kills mycorrhizal fungi. Too much potassium ties up boron, and it's not available, and you need that in just tiny amounts. Too much boron results in produce rotting after harvest. Too much nitrogen, which is an easy one to do, ties up copper and makes tissues watery, and attracts aphids. Aphids can sense with their antennae which plants are stressed, which plants have watery tissue, too much nitrogen. So in other words, you don't want to oversaturate. You can get a soil test and follow recommendations. And on my website, with all this free info, I have 3 labs that I like to recommend that you can use to send in your soil sample. So in other words, get your soil healthy. That's going to make healthy plants, and they can resist disease. And then we have healthy people. So when you're balancing your nutrients, you want to prevent deficiencies. You want to prevent excesses as well as deficiencies. This will help prevent disease. It prevents a lot of the pests and weeds. Not always, not all of the time, but it goes a long ways towards doing that. For example, the guy who introduced fishbone meal is Bob Gregg. He died just a few years ago here. He started a business called Alaska Sea Egg. He was also a grower of the best potatoes in the valley. 4 times the late blight, potato blight, swept through the valley. 4 times his fields of potatoes stood strong, and he did not use some heavy copper treatment. He used no treatment. All his neighbors growing commercial potatoes, their crops went flat, and that late blight can lay your potatoes flat in about 4 days. There's your living on the ground, dead, sick. That's what drove the Irish out of Ireland. Late blight. Bob Gregg's potato plants stood tall because he was using manure and fishbone meal and fish meal and trace minerals in things like kelp, and doing everything he could to boost soil health and minerals. And by golly, those plants had the immunity. So that's what I'm talking about. If you're seeing this in your garden, that is a mineral deficiency, blossom end rot on your squash, your zucchinis. You need more calcium. Same for your tomatoes, you need more calcium. It's a deficiency. It's not necessarily a disease. It just leaves the plant weak, so it is susceptible and vulnerable to the disease. Calcium, where do you get it? Well, eggshells, fish bone meal, not fish meal, but fish bone meal. Adding lime, adding liquid calcium on the right there. I sometimes hit the bottle because I need to add some more, even though I use quite a bit of fish bone meal. Bone meal helps. Rock phosphate is rich in calcium. Oyster shell. All these will help. You're strengthening the plant rather than making an enemy of the pest. That's the big difference. Okay, our second one, utilize companion and mixed planting. I find that companion planting gets very confusing. Some plants kind of repel other plants. They're just not all that chemically compatible. But boy, do you go nuts. So I made a simple chart. Ellie's companion planting, it's on the right there. I think that's free on the website. So if you group things like dill, cabbage, potato, celery, beets, onions, nasturtium, that very bottom circle there, that really will help repel some things and bring out the strength and flavor of those companions. And there's books about this. And then I want to say that sometimes I just mix it up. I don't pay much attention to companion plants, although I could. It drives me nuts. So I give you permission to just mix them up. Now, let's say somebody gives you a nice little bunch of starts or a house plant. Thank you very much. And you take it and whisk it into a separate room, cover it, look all over it with a hand lens, and you are putting that in quarantine. See what's going on. Are you bringing in aphids? Are you bringing in spider mites? What's going on? And then if you have to treat, you could just put a big bag over that particular set of plants and spray them if you feel the need to spray them, and take care of that so you're not spreading it to everything else. We know all about quarantine, so think about quarantine now for your plants. Okay, rotate crops, some, not all. Mindful irrigation, moisture management, ventilation, barriers, trap crops. Oh, goodness. When I'm speaking of different varieties and mixing it up, avoiding a monoculture, I'm saying interplant your flowers, your herbs, your vegetables. It's real nice and convenient to have all your broccoli in one place and all your onions in another, but boy, are you giving those pests, namely the cabbage root maggot and the onion root maggot, a banquet. Thank you. I'll just go from plant to plant. Thanks very much. You want to have lots of bees coming in. You want wasps coming in, predators of all kinds, and lacewings. Rotate crops. Potato scab, your root maggots. If you can get a rotation plan, this is a 4-way rotation plan. You can figure out any scheme you like, but especially on the bottom it says cole and onion families. By cole I mean all your cabbage family. It's good to rotate those. It's good to rotate your onion families, onions being leeks. And if you have a chive plant nearby, that's probably going to have a nice supply of onion root maggots in it, and that will spread to your annual onions. So move them around. Reduce stress, moisture, humidity, hot and cold. If you can get in the habit of irrigating in the morning with drip tape instead of a sprinkler, you're keeping that moisture down, and it can dry midday. If you leave the sprinkler on at night for a while and that water sits around on the surfaces of the leaves, you're asking for more possibility of diseases. You want to kind of manage your humidity in your hoop houses and high tunnels and low tunnels. Keep some circulation going. Have a fan, do what you can, space those plants so there's good ventilation. If you crowd too much, that will also build up the humidity, build up the moisture, and then you get the gray mold and so on. And the slugs. Slugs don't like dry, they love wet. Row covers, fences, barriers. John, you asked about, can I put a barrier to keep those aphids out? I think you've got something else going on, and I would say no for aphids, but I love floating row covers. If they're sealed down and brand new and have no holes in them, they will keep out the onion root maggot fly, the adult. They will keep out the cabbage root maggot fly, the adult, who's going to come by, lay eggs. They can't get through the barrier. And then some years we have problems with cutworms. Um, do I have a picture? I guess I don't. Cutworms are these brown caterpillars that crawl along, and they come to a plant and they love to eat right at where soil meets stem. And you come by in the morning and it looks like somebody went timber and did a clear cut all your plants down. So you can plant your plants into collars. They bump into the collar and don't chew your stem. Foster diversity, encourage natural predators. Um, you're needing lots of different things. If you're feeding your songbirds all winter, then they're around in the summer to help you with your pest management as well. Here's what I mean by mixing it up. Habitat for beneficials and not encouraging a banquet that's just row after row after row of something good. Alyssum, that white plant, they're a continual blossom and bees love them, so they keep coming. So then in the right-hand picture, if a zucchini's right next door, well, great. When the zucchinis start blooming, they'll go pollinate those as well. Happy day. So flowers, herbs, and vegetables make it beautiful, keep the bees coming, and prevent this munch, munch, munch on down the row. You could call it interplanting or mix it up. It's beautiful. All those textures and colors. Ah. On a larger scale, if you can put some wild strips every so often in your field, that's a nice habitat and sanctuary for some pollinators and predators. Trap crops. This is a nice little trick. On the left are onions I'm about to plant out. They attract a fly called the onion root maggot. So the fly comes along, lays a little white cluster of eggs on the stem of the onion. And I don't know of any trap crop. I don't know of any natural predator that could really do the job. But before I plant them, I'll go through with my Q-tip dipped in a little alcohol, and I'll just look on each stem and just touch that little egg cluster, that little white dot. And now I've stopped the problem from going any farther of those eggs hatching, the larva crawling down into the root, hatching into their larvae, I say hatching, growing into larger and larger larvae, and then finally into pupa and adult and continuing the cycle. On the right, radishes can be a trap crop. What am I talking about? If you have a bed of a cole crop, broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, whatever you have, if you'll do a perimeter as soon as you set those plants out into your beds, do a perimeter of radish seeds. Nothing fancy, just cheap bulk radish seed. For some reason, they're in the same brassica and cruciferae family. When the cabbage root maggot and turnip root maggot come along, they'll go for the radishes first. So you go ahead and just let them attract, and the adult lays eggs and the radishes grow, and then you go along and pull them all out. You've trapped them, pull them all out. Yeah, they're disfigured. That's good. You wanted them to go into your radishes, not your broccoli. Throw them in the compost pile. They can't complete their life cycle. Happy day. You've done a trap crop. Immediately plant with some more radish seed. Maybe 1 or 2 more cycles of this till the broccoli or cauliflower, whatever it is, has gotten so big that it can sustain any further damage. In a high tunnel in a greenhouse, I'd get some sticky traps. Those are available at Alaska Mill and Feed and many of the garden stores, finally. They're yellow and blue, and they'll tell you what's going on. If you see the beginnings of little dots on those, you're knowing that you're about to have a population explosion of whiteflies or of aphids. That's a nice way to tell before they get to be big size. That tells you quickly go get some lacewings and ladybugs and release them into your enclosed hoop house, high tunnel, greenhouse. That's the time to do it, to stay ahead of it. So on the left there, that picture is aphids. They can multiply so fast. It helps if you can identify what's on the sticky trap or on your stem. Is it an aphid or a fungus gnat? Is it a thrip? Is it a whitefly? Who done it? The Pest Scout can help you out. And the lacewing on the left upper is the best predator. Bottom there, the Ladybird Beetle that you're familiar with, munching on an aphid. And the larva of the Ladybird Beetle or ladybug is shown on the right. They're the ones that eat the most. It takes a while, but they will bring things into balance if you introduce this predator stuff. It just takes a while for the cycle to catch up. So lacewings, ladybugs, and then now I have a picture here of Trichogramma wasps. They're a little parasitic wasp, and parasitic nematodes. So you have a lot of weapons, you might say. Peaceful Valley Farm Supply has a great video about beneficial insects. It's a 5-minute, excellent thing. It explains Trichogramma wasps and so on. And if you are just getting going on your soil health, you'll hear a lot about raising the brix, B-R-I-X. That's the sugar levels and dissolved mineral levels in your leaves, where the photosynthesis is being created. So this is a long-term thing. Build those minerals and your microbes to make the minerals available. And the more your plants are healthy, the more the aphids start chewing on them and go, the sugar levels are so high that the aphid eats into your leaf and they get the worst stomach ache ever and explode from the inside out. All that sugar turned into alcohol and blew them up. Kind of gross, but that's what happens. So we've talked about prevention, building soil, mix them up, all that. If you have to treat, again, thinking what you're affecting that you didn't mean to. Anything that you use will affect the non-target organisms. So if you spray an herbicide on your weedy lawn, your tree may die. That's a non-target organism. Bees are non-target organisms. We didn't aim to kill them, but we might have. Salmon are affected by tiny amounts. So prevention and then treatment is diagnose and then treat. There's lots of references. You can look stuff up. And now we have the internet. Johnny Selected Seeds, Peaceful Valley Farm Supply, Gardens Alive, Planet Natural all have excellent resources. And your Pest Scout. Rincon Vitova is in California, but boy, you can say, here's what I have and here's my problem, here's what I'm growing, and they will consult. They have an insectary, they can ship what you need for a beneficial. Johnny's seed catalog and Johnny's website has a whole insecticide comparison chart. What's the problem? What's the solution? Look at all that stuff. The solution chart, this is from Peaceful Valley Farm Supply. What have you got? What can you use? What's effective? Lots of tools. But finally, let's get to slugs. But let me just check. Any questions, Brooke, before I rattle on?
I don't see any in the chat right now, so if anything pops up, I'll chime in and let you know.
Alrighty. So Elliot Coleman, the great grower out in Maine, says insects, pests attack only weak, sickly plant specimens lacking proper nutrition. That's his quote. My quote is, except slugs. Slugs are an indicator you're doing a lot right. You've got nutritious, juicy, yummy vegetables. And so when I moved to the valley, I brought slugs out with me by moving out firewood and moving my compost pile. Oh goodness, if you are still in an area that doesn't have many, don't bring them. Their eggs are loaded in and things like I mentioned. And then you're looking for habitat. Right now we're in late April. So as we start uncovering and raking, there's a drip line around your house. I would look very carefully for slug eggs, and I would get a little bottle of ammonia and water and spray those eggs. I would look under boards and bricks and stones that you have around and spray under there when you see eggs. It's about 1 part ammonia to 3 parts water is plenty enough to kill slugs. And when I say ammonia solution, I mean that is just going to turn into fertilizer. It's not going to harm your soil food web. You could also use bleach, but for heaven's sakes, don't mix the two. Don't mix ammonia and bleach. You have mustard gas. You could kill yourself instead. And then as you set up your garden beds, you can put out boards or cardboard or even grapefruit rinds and that kind of thing. And now you're turning them over in the morning and hunting and squishing adults. You have to do so much for slugs. There's no one solution that I can give you. You're trying to eliminate a lot of the eggs you're discovering right now into April and May. And then you're doing a watering system that doesn't keep everything wet all night. You are spacing your plants so that there's enough ventilation to dry things. And you're putting out cover for slugs so they hide in the morning because they don't like the light. They go under there, and now you're hunting and killing. And then you can try putting little fences or barriers. If your dog is shedding, save it all. Human hair is also good and scratchy on those tender surfaces of a slug. They don't like that. They'll turn away from it. If you sprinkle an ash fence around your beds, that slows them down. They do not like ash. Or diatomaceous earth, which is very spiky, scratchy. It's also a repellent. You can use diatomaceous earth plus alum salt in a mix and sprinkle a band around your plants. Copper strip barriers help a little bit, particularly if you have raised beds with wood, and you can stick the copper strip on there. It has an adhesive back, and they don't like crossing copper. their bodies are moist and they can feel a little current, a very micro amount of electrical current, and they don't like that either. You can use coarse sand or fine gravel to make a barrier around your beds and your plants.
But
These all
wait,
help. Go ahead.
sorry, we do have a question. Sandra's asking, is Slogo reasonable to use for slugs?
Yes, yes. Let me finish the thought and then go on to that, Sandra. Um, all of these repellents, the hair, the DE, the copper, the gravel, it helps until it rains. And then a slug can climb over a razor. A slug will climb right through anything. It's all wet. So you have to redo these barriers after things dry out again. And the formula again, about 4 parts, I misspoke, 4 parts water to 1 part ammonia to get eggs. I would use ammonia instead of bleach. It's a much better solution. Cedar chips are reported to help. Crushed oyster shells are kind of rough, and they're reported to help a little bit as, again, a band or a barrier that you sprinkle. Eggshells slow them down. Coffee grounds slow them down. Spruce needles. The picture there is the size of the slug eggs, which are a little smaller than a BB. If you're someone who knows the size of a BB for a BB gun. Now, Sandra, Sluggo, yes, it's approved by organic growing approval agencies. It's iron phosphate. So sprinkle that around. The slugs won't die immediately, but as they ingest it, it slowly kills them. According to some authorities, if you spray with a coffee solution, that also kills them, but fairly slowly. That's just too much Java. There's too much caffeine, and it's toxic to them eventually. So there's your treatment. Cheap roast. And you can sprinkle the coffee or coffee grounds or make a spray out of coffee or coffee grounds. I'm thinking around the base of plants, that would help. But your very best is deploy ducks. Besides, they give you all that good manure. So you get to learn something else about integrating your livestock, and boy, oh boy, do they go after slug eggs, they go after slugs. They'll eat till they're so full, rest up, and then go eat some more. So that's all I know about slugs. Do everything. Even then, you're going to have some. The permaculturalists claim that if you have enough diversity and enough things going on, you won't have the slug problem, but I don't know that that's become part of my experience. What I do know is that if I get angry, mad, and go into warfare mode, the slugs can feel that, and they know it, and they will go into survival mode, and now you do have a war. They feel your hate, they feel your vengeance, and they will populate to say, we'll do everything we can to survive. So try to back out of that as best you can. And as you deal with slugs, if you can give them a quick squish, a quick smash, a quick stomp, a quick clip in half with your clippers, you want to acknowledge that they're a life form made by the Creator, and they're just doing their job. We imported them to Alaska. We started the problem. They're just doing their job. So try not to let your frustration turn into meanness. Do not add to the suffering of the world by making them die slowly in a salt bath or something like that. Any new questions?
We don't have any new ones right now.
Alrighty. If you have to use an insecticide, so we're moving away from slugs now, your first considerations again are, have you offered predators and beneficial insects the kind of habitat they need, lots of flowers and herbs and diversity, and have you tried the deterrents and barriers, and your killers are your last resort. When you see organic, that's one set of regulations. When you see IPM, that means integrated pest management. It's kind of a way of saying, yes, sometimes you use an herbicide, insecticide, fungicide, but a small amount and only when you have to. I'm a little, I like to use all the tools in the toolbox, but sometimes integrated pest management can be kind of an excuse for spray at this time when you don't need to. Mostly I'm encouraging you to get fully in the paradigm of doing the life-affirming practices. Build your soil, build the diversity, build the beneficials.
We do have a question.
All right.
John is asking what to do with heavy aphids once they look like dull berries on the plant. Remove the plant is what I've done.
Yes, thank you, John. I didn't address that. I'm thinking that your aphids are an indicator that perhaps a little bit too rich in nitrogen. And I don't know of how widespread they were, or if that just happened to be one hatch. Boy, it's hard to say. Sometimes you can just rub the stem with your fingers every day and kind of knock the population back. John, did you have them widespread, or was it just on one or two kale plants? Go ahead and unmute and tell us
about
about
a
it.
couple dozen plants.
Oh, wow. I sure suspect it was a soil problem. What a puzzlement. And you might try that ammonia spray on them that I suggested for slugs. Because if it's outdoors, it's going to not do much good to release ladybugs or lacewings, but you might try that. I just wonder if you'll have it again this year. What are you using for fertilizers?
Says I've used only have used only compost each fall about 2 inches.
Okay. And compost, of course, is always your best amendment for a nice balanced dose. At some point, you might get a soil test, and that will help. And I'm thinking, because all of your cole crops, like kale, are heavy feeders. They put out a lot of leafy green, and they need a little more nitrogen than sometimes compost will provide. You might try incorporating a little bit of liquid fish out of a jug, or a little fish meal, or a little blood meal, just to give them a boost in nitrogen, because they're such heavy feeders.
We do have another question if you've wrapped that one up.
Okay.
So Jesse said, last year the kale in my garden got infested with small white powdery bugs. Using the internet, I guess they were mealy bugs. Do you have any strategies to get rid of them?
not specifically interesting. Probably all the same advice I just gave to John. You might try a little ammonia spray because the ammonia will give it a little boost of nitrogen and kill them off so they don't keep multiplying. I don't know how much damage they're doing. And then long term, see what's going on with your soil. You may need to enrich it a little bit more with just a jug of that Alaska liquid fish fertilizer or some fish hydrolysate so that they build up their strength. And also just rubbing will get, that's kind of the hand pick method to try all those. But I'd love it if you email me and send me pictures and tell me what you're trying, and we'll all learn together here. I don't know what to do about that pest, but we all have them. This is the picture of the fly and the larva that hatches from the eggs on root maggots and cabbage. So again, we're kind of circling back here. Prevention is the row cover or trap crops. But if you have to go to treatment, then there's beneficial nematodes, and that scan mask is a sample of a package of beneficial nematodes. I think they're dried in the package, and you probably mix with water in your watering can, and that will help once they've established if you want to save your crop. Aphids, you can also just try plain old water blasts. Aphids, sawflies, spider bites, thrips, or a diluted soap. So I said ammonia, but safer soap or Castile soap like Dr. Bronner's, or a little ivory dish detergent, that kind of thing. A very small amount in a large amount of water, and you spray or you dip, and then you rinse it off and repeat in 2 days. There's a picture of safer soap, and get a sprayer that you like. Sucking insects like the ones that put their little mouth parts right in the tissue, a hot pepper spray recipe is some garlic, onion, cayenne pepper, and water. And you mix this up in your blender, and a little touch of soap because that soap will help it cling, and then you spray that on. So if you want to take a minute to write that down, great, but it's also, I think, on my website for free. When you're treating, it'll take repeated ones because everything's in a life cycle that some eggs are still hatching out, and the next day some eggs are still hatching out. And it's a good idea if you can get a sprayer like this. Alaska Mill was carrying for a while, and then they quit, but the nozzle rotates so you can get up under leaves. It's great for spreading compost tea. It's great for spreading the hot pepper mix or whatever it is. You can twist it around and get at all angles around your tomatoes and under the leaves and petioles and everything. But spray a little section first and see if harm comes, and then come back the next day and see if it's good to use. Brooke, do you know if you carry that 360 sprayer?
I have not seen that in a while, so we do not have it currently at the store.
Well, there's my recommendation.
I will let Jeff know. I think he's the one who orders those. And it's called the 360 sprayer?
It is, yeah. There's two sizes, but just order the large size. I had to buy some Azomax to get a decent sprayer that had a nozzle that goes in 360. That was an expensive little measure. You will see in the catalogs that there are some approved pesticides that are made from plant materials, OMRI being Organic Material Review Institute. They're approved: rotenone, pyrethrum, nicotine, derrick, margosan, and quassia. I don't recommend any of them. They'll work on your problem, but they'll cause some non-target organisms to die. Rotenone is implicated in Parkinson's disease. It's a possible cause. I would just steer away from these names. I would recommend the good old Safer soap, insect killing soap. Use it according to directions and then rinse. Fungus gnats, white flies, aphids. It works.
We did have somebody comment. Hannah wrote, I start seeds in February down in the crawl space. Soon the aphids cover my starts. I try all of these and don't do anything, and it doesn't do anything.
Oh,
By this time of year, they completely cover everything.
oh, frustrating. Ah, I wonder if you can somehow rig up enough plastic sheeting around the whole mess, the whole mess of flats, I mean, and your light banks, and then introduce your lacewings and ladybugs in there. Peel back your shower curtain type barriers to get in there to water and check your plants. But I wonder if you could make a containment like that. But you just can't keep ahead of the aphids. How frustrating. What are you using for soil?
I don't see a response yet from Hannah.
Okay. Yeah. So it's supposed to work, but she's finding it doesn't
Oh,
always.
just a second. She said organic potting mix.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have Zara also saying, I've been using Natural.
Oh, yes.
Oof, there is something in there I cannot pronounce. It's
Bacillus
Bacillus.
thuringiensis.
Yeah,
Oh,
there you go. That's what it's saying. And she's saying, do you recommend it? Then that's where in blueberry plant starts I bought. The gnats were in blueberry plants.
I raise red wiggler worms, and so that's a lot of moist, wet, delicious, organically rich material for fungus gnats. And I got both fungus gnats and fruit flies in there so bad. And then I used Bacillus thuringiensis, or BT, with, so the commercial name is Natural, but also mosquito dunks, same thing. And you take a hammer and beat up a mosquito dunk donut and soak that in water for a few hours, strain it and spray with it. And I had to do that continuously for about 4 or 5 weeks till finally the population died down. But there's Bacillus thuringiensis and then different varieties. Dipel is one of them. I don't know. There's 10. So I've written here Tenebrianius. I can't pronounce it. For mosquitoes and black flies. For fungus gnats, it's Israeli is the variety, but that's a good ally for you. So maybe that would work on your aphids. I've not had an aphid problem to learn much about it. So Hannah, we're depending on you to learn more and share with us. If you can try some BT and get the right variety. So Bacillus thuringiensis is the genus and the species, and then variety would be Israeli or Tenebrianus or whatever. See what they offer. So again, if you have your sticky traps and you can identify what you've got, that will help with your treatment. Okay, bad joke. People will call and say, I have all these things all over my currant bushes, and I have worms on my currant bushes. I have leaf rollers, I have tent caterpillars. Well, let's talk about the currant bushes. The caterpillars are from sawfly larvae, and they won't respond to BT, or in this picture, dipel. That won't work. You have to hand pick them or use neem oil or a spinosad product. Do some more research. Sawfly larvae just don't respond to BT the same way as the other things we mentioned. So I'm told here. So there's the variety Kerstaki for a lot of your caterpillar stages, and spinosad. What the heck is spinosad? BT was co-opted by the GMO industry, the genetically modified organisms, and they have bred BT into every cell of every plant of BT crops like cotton, soy, corn. So spinosad is kind of the next solution. This is what you look for. Insect spray, and then it contains spinosad. Again, using a microorganism like a certain kind of bacteria or bacillus to outdo your pest. Neem oil is a very hard-hitting organic choice, and it kills almost everything. Neem oil treats aphids, stink bugs, caterpillars, I'm told, leaf hoppers, leaf miners, whitefly, mealybugs, midges, nematodes, spider mites, scale, thrips. Goodness. So try to be very specific where you're spraying this stuff. And Hannah, have you tried neem oil?
She says doesn't work.
Oh, okay. Wow. We've got some aphids that have gotten quite mutated or something. Oh dear.
John did mention 2 years ago we had worms crawling to the tops of Ford Hook giant Swiss chard 2 feet above the soil. Odd. Do you have any clue why?
Yikes, I don't. You're a good observer, but I'm maybe the Pest Scout knows a whole lot more. Definitely the Pest Scout knows more than I do. There's one on the Kenai, a Pest Scout. There's one in Fairbanks. There's one in Matsu. So I guess instead of amateur Ellie, go to them and see what they recommend. Azamax is what a lot of hydroponic weed growers, marijuana growers use. Ooh, miticide, nematocide, and insecticide. It's a neem product. It's very strong. It's a last resort. So you might have to use that. But fix your soil first. Then there's moose and rabbits. Plant skid, you can't put it directly on your tree or your plants, but you can certainly hang little sponges of it, or you could drive stakes nearby under the drip line there and put some plant skid spray on there. But fencing's the very best thing for your rabbits and for your moose. But it takes a lot of fence. Oh my goodness. Then there's insect traps using pheromones or lures, and there's wild strips that I had mentioned between crop beds to keep predaceous insects happy and give them a breeding place and a sanctuary. So much to learn, and I've been some help, but not all, and there's lots of mutual learning. We need to share lots more. Do your prevention first. Soil health, crop rotation, proper watering, interplanting, plant spacing and ventilation, monitor, use disease-resistant varieties, biodiversity, do your trap crops and barriers. And then I'm thinking before we start any plant diseases, let's just check our time and see if that's just enough to digest for one time here. So in your chat box or just unmute, tell us if that feels like about enough, or if you really want to go through some plant diseases and a few thoughts about weeds.
Valerie said, yes, please. John said, I am open to more. Another person said, I love to learn all I can from you. Keep going. Somebody said, can you share the website from earlier again? It was RhineConv something.
Oh, Rincon Vitova is a company in California. RINCON dash Vitova, VITOVA.
I'll put that in the chat. There we go. And then Karen said, would love to hear about how to get rid of chickweed and also that little purple bluebell plant that has stretchy roots.
Okay. I'm probably not much help on that one. We'll blast on, and if you have to go, thanks for coming, and I'd love your final thoughts in the chat box as far as critique or some tips for the rest of us. I consider us a whole learning community, and I just love you dearly, and thanks for all your growing and your ecological mindset. So thank you. Here we go. Plant diseases. There's tip burn and slime. You open some lettuce and it's gucky, slimy inside. Gray mold is botrytis, powdery mildew, fusarium wilt, phytophthora, late blight, early blight on potatoes and tomatoes, leaf blight on grapes, black spot on roses and such, apple scab, potato scab, ring rot on roots. You have a lot of weapons to use, a lot of resources. I don't think you'll need to use anything hard hitting. For the fungal diseases, you can use any of these and they all work. I don't think that you need to combine them, but do some experimenting. Cheap stuff from the grocery store or nearby. And here's where we're in this paradigm of try to get into the microorganism world and think about, can I outnumber the bad guys with the good guys? Can I build up beneficials that will outcompete the fungal disease. So spraying molasses on plants, that sugar feeds your beneficials, and now you've got kind of a bioshield around your leaves, and it's harder for a plant disease spore to get in there because you've got a microscopic bioshield. Spraying baking soda on plants for disease is kind of a different approach. Of the baking soda is harsh. It's going to change the pH and make it very difficult for a disease spore to get a toehold. Diatomaceous earth is spiky and breaks up a lot of the little cells of the filamentous, tiny little fungal disease that's going on. Diatomaceous earth is so spiky, scratchy. That liquid fish hydrolysate, liquid fish emulsion, spraying that on, same as making a liquid kelp. Oh, you're adding to the beneficial populations on your leaves. And boy, if you can get a sprayer that'll spray under the leaves, on the leaves, petioles, stems, branches, get 70% of your plant surface on your tomatoes or whatever it is, you will have a great bioshield. You can even use milk, good old milk, instead of fish or kelp or molasses. That too will feed beneficials and build that bioshield. Compost tea is my favorite. I happen to make it. It's the actively aerated compost tea that's very, very, very diverse and in microorganisms and adds nutrition as well. That's going to add beneficial microbes as well as help those that are there to grow. You can also drench the roots with it. And then there's a product that Alaska Mill was carrying but doesn't anymore. You'd have to order it. Soil Provide with Soil Revive. It's compost tea that the person who bought Elaine Ingham's lab, Matt Slaughter, learned how to put compost tea in a stable solution that's good for a year, so you can use it anytime instead of within 5 to 8 hours like you have to for a fresh compost tea. But just look at that. Molasses, diatomaceous earth and soda, not combinations, but easy to get resources. Liquid fish, liquid kelp, milk. Ooh, that all helps immensely. So your strawberries are getting kind of full of mold and mildew. On the lower right, you see those tiny little filaments. That's the fungi. You see the spots. But the treatment's about the same. Before it gets any farther, well, if it's more than 50% of the leaf coverage, you're kind of too late. But if you see the beginnings of it, hit it with your kelp or your fish or your molasses or your compost tea or your milk. Spray, 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 and get as much leaf surface as you can. And check your water too. Stick your finger in the ground. Is it truly watered all the way down to the roots? We don't get much rain and need to make sure they're well watered. Here's a recipe for a milk solution. You would dilute about 1 cup of milk to 9 cups, so you have a total of 10 cups. And you spray twice a week. You'll control powdery mildew on zucchini, squash vines, and a whole lot else here. Molasses. Molasses is hard to mix, but if you get an organic molasses, it should not have a preservative in it. mix that molasses with water and mix it and mix it and mix it until it finally turns into a better liquid. And then you strain it and spray, spray, spray. You can buy some products. Serenade, Trichogramma. They have a bacterium, Bacillus subtilis, that can be used to prevent and treat outbreaks of botrytis all the way up till harvest. These species are also fungal, but colonize plants in a symbiotic relationship. I think I need to correct that sentence, and I apologize. It's a little confusing. So, in other words, you can buy products like Serenade, and you can also buy compost tea if you're near Palmer. I provide it in May and June fresh, or you can brew your own. I had an outbreak. Have you seen stuff like that on your plants? Boy, did I have an outbreak. Ugh. So it was Sclerotinia, fungal disease. First, I sprayed the infected parts with peroxide, a dilution of very strong peroxide, stronger than something you'd buy at the pharmacy. And then I wanted to kill what was there if I could. And then I followed with actively aerated compost tea, my best stuff, and spray it so I'd get the beneficials growing back there. And I'd have to, first of all, before I even took the peroxide to it, clip away and take all that infected stuff into a garbage bag and get it off the property. And I'd have to use gloves and try not to touch anything else because I'd be spreading this stuff. Oh my goodness. So first, remove the infected stuff as best you can without contaminating anything else by where you drag it or sit it, and then peroxide and then compost tea. There's a product called Actinovate, common in your seed catalogs, like Peaceful Valley Farm Supply and Johnny's and so forth. Those fungicides also work, and you can buy diatomaceous earth. Here's a nice chart from Johnny's seed catalog. Actinovate on the top of the column, and then you go over and see what it's supposed to treat. It treats Sclerotinia, which I had, also Rhizoctonia, powdery mildew, Phytophthora, ooh, downy, not so good. Okay, so you have some resources. It's just a little research to figure it out. And weeds, this is kind of short and sweet. If you can't spray them, we gardeners are out there getting our meditation and zen by hand weeding. Weeds are telling you messages, and weeds have some benefits. If you have DOC, it's telling you have poorly drained soil, you have light soil, you have a calcium deficiency. Lots of dandelions. The dandelions are saying to you, we are bringing up calcium from subsoils with our long tap roots. We're going to be done in about 25 years bringing that up, so it's not very friendly soil to us anymore. And also we're saying you have potassium excess. If you have sorrel, there's a calcium and phosphorus deficiency. Buttercup is poor drainage, low pH, maybe some cobalt deficiency. Thistles, well, some deficiencies. Chickweed and cleavers, very low in calcium. So somebody, I forget who of you wanted to know about chickweed. Chickweed is an indicator you're doing everything right in your garden. Maybe you could get some calcium levels up there, but I don't think it's going to stop it. You just need to get chickweed out before it blooms and seeds. Calcium, if you want to build the calcium up, use Calphos, which is rock phosphate in your fertilizer program. A little more lime, maybe. There's lots of ways to get some calcium in there, also fish bone meal. And then foxtail is an indicator that you're leaving the soil blank and bare, and it's just asking for foxtail to get in there. So maybe you've got high magnesium and low calcium, but don't leave bare soil, get a cover crop on it. All of this is from a book I found called When Weeds Talk by Jay McCammon. So weed management, prevention, again, your soil, your nutrition and your balance, and mulches. If you can mulch heavily, you'll slow down the weeds. There's weed blocks, there's lots of cardboard layers or newspaper layers, that helps. And prevention is also keeping weeds in check so they don't come back the next year because you've left them to go to seed. Weeding is mostly hand weeding, mechanically. If you are growing a pretty big operation, you can consider a flamer or hot water or even a grit blast. Oh goodness. I used some flaming myself when I had an area that I had just brought under cultivation, and I got everything out of there as far as, oh my goodness, cow parsnip and old canes of berries that were defunct. And then there's just a little bit of chickweed going into the fall. So I did a quick zoom over the surface, flaming. You don't have to incinerate each plant. You just give it a quick singe, and that kept it in that tricky October time from going into flower, fruit, and seed, and then leaving me seeds for next year. And the next year I had chickens, so I could have the chickens do most of that, but I think I even followed with renting a little flamer and a tank of propane and went over it. If you want to kill weeds, you've got the commercial products, but you've also got vinegar. Brooke, are you still there?
I am still here.
Brooke, do you know if you carry the concentrated vinegar? By that I mean a 20% vinegar as opposed to the grocery store vinegar, which is about a 3%.
So I know we got in some gardening vinegar last year. Let me see if we have it this year. Just a second. Oh.
With vinegar, you spot treat. While she's looking it up, I'll just say that you don't want to dig it up. You just want to spot treat. You don't want to plow up the whole thing or cultivate or go over whole field with vinegar, but walking from here to there, splat, splat, splat. The vinegar will kill things on the top. They won't get a root of a dandelion because the root is so deep it just comes back. But for your chickweed,
looks like we do, sorry to interrupt, it looks like we do have it on order. It's not due until about mid-May though.
Oh, that's perfect. Yeah. Oh, good. Excellent. Surprisingly, one author says that keeping up your calcium levels and spraying with molasses will suppress weeds. And I guess it's because of what we've talked about with a lot of the weeds showing us that we have a calcium deficiency and we need to have more nutrition for the plants that we're trying to favor, our food crops and flowers and herbs. Mulches are fun to think about. Mulching with wood chips, for example, or mulching with grass and leaves. It's all going to hold in the moisture. On the left in this picture, you see plants grown with mulch produce higher yields. You're keeping the soil moist, keeping it one even temperature. And on the right, there's all that evaporation. You're drying up your soil food web and your roots. So if you have wood chips, great, or grass and leaves, mulch with that. Straw, compost, newspaper, or the plastics like IRT, infrared transfer. It's that very thin plastic you put on the ground and plant through it by poking a hole in it. It filters out how's that go? It lets in the warmth, but filters out the spectrum, the parts of the spectrum that would grow plants. You're taking out those light rays. IRT with a cover over it makes quite a nice little growing system for a low tunnel. The soil is warmed, the weeds can't grow through, and then you've got row cover on top to keep warmth in and insects out. And then there's the conflict. Nice mulch means that it's a nice place for slugs to hide out. So I guess you could use Sluggo plus mulch and some ducks and some hand picking and see if you can integrate all of that. So on the left, you see some black plastic, which is okay, but on the very left lower, you see IRT. Do you sell that by the foot at Alaska Mill?
Is it landscape fabric?
It is called IRT.
Let me see if I can find it listed under that.
Infrared transfer. It's a very thin, light plastic material, and it's green.
So yes, we do. It's we call it mulch film, and that's the IRT, and it's 48-inch by 200-foot rolls.
How much?
Well, let me see. Hold on. That one's going to be $57.99. Let me see if we have it in any other sizes.
It's nice to have whole roll because next year there'll be some that's too damaged to reuse, and so you just have some next year's supply if you have to buy a whole roll.
Yeah, so that's the only roll we have.
Okay. There are some landscape fabrics. The permaculturalists don't like all these fancy things, but they do have their place. Market gardeners, like the book you see over on the right hand, he's got a nice system for putting tarps over areas for market gardeners. So you're done with that spinach patch and you tarp it, kill the weeds, and then you come back in a couple weeks and plant into there, and you've kept it all dark so that nothing germinated. There's some interesting rotations. So flame weeding and tarps and knowing what you're doing can eliminate a lot of weed problems. And for market gardeners, that's such an expense to hire people to pull weeds. Around trees, there's cocoa mulch, as you see on the left, and on the right here's some raised beds, and they have straw all over them. Keep it thick enough so that weeds can't grow through it. That's a nice system. You kind of pull it back, plant your plant, and tuck it around again and tuck them in for the night. There's lots of different ways to manage your weeds. Stirrup hose and onion hose and anything that you can keep sharp by touching it up with a file really is nice to just catch the weeds just under the surface. So you get their stem and just enough of the base of the roots so that you detach the whole thing and then your weeds die in the sun. Here's a picture of the flame weeding. He's doing a very quick pass with this just a singe. You don't have to incinerate each one. So market gardeners will plant their carrot seed, and the carrot seed takes a while to come up. In the meantime, your chickweed and lamb's quarters come up, and then you give it a quick pass of flame, and then your carrots come up kind of weed free. Oops, I went backwards. You can read more about this. So there's a small scale thing where you just use a little tank of propane and hook up a burner. The burners come in different sizes. I have rented them. They're very cheap. And for larger operations, then you would have it mounted on wheels and burn a whole bit across, I'm sorry, instead of just a little single flamer like that. If you think the way I'm going to get at these weeds is to cultivate some more, I'm going to till them all under, you do some damage. I love my rototiller, but if I use it, I am bringing up new seed that has been stored away under the ground and new grasses, and oh gee, I got more than I had before. So I try to minimize my cultivation and hold back on that. I use the rototiller only if I'm really seriously bringing something that was all grass into cultivation or something like that. If you use drip irrigation, it means that you can just water where your vegetables and flowers are, but not way off into the edges where you're just watering weeds. If you can direct the water, you'll starve out the weeds. Really notice where your water is. If you just set a sprinkler mindlessly and let it go, then you're going to water everything and get lots and lots of weeds everywhere. And then there's things like lamb's quarters that come up, and nettles and chickweed, and dandelion and plantain and fireweed. They are so good for you and so loaded with nutrients. 5, 10, 15, 20 times more calcium and iron than anything you can grow. So there's times when you're weeding and you just want to have 2 buckets, one for weeds that are going to the compost and one that you're going to eat or make medicine from, make a tincture or a pesto or something like that. Dandelion roots, of course, are so excellent to dry out and then make into a simmer for a tea all winter to keep your liver healthy. Nettles, good for everything. Chickweed can be made into a salve that cures any skin disease you have, and many claim it cures a lot of the skin cancers. Plantain pulls out infection from your cut finger or whatever it is. Oh, goodness. Wheaties. Now we're circling back to vinegar for just a minute. 3% is what you buy in the store. It'll kind of work, but Brooke is telling us they're getting the concentrated vinegar. That's what you want to apply to weeds. Just remember that it won't get dandelion dead. It'll suppress it till you finally starve it, I guess. But there's a lot else that you can apply the vinegar to, that like cracks between the pavers on your walkway and that kind of thing, or between your rocks and your whatever you have. It's nice. It'll get in there and do the job. But you're spot treating with it. It's not a broadcast. It's a spot treatment with vinegar. And this Avenger, that's a commercial vinegar that you would buy. And once again, watch out for this warfare mentality of violence that seems pervasive in our society. Fear-mongering terms like invasive, the enemy, warfare. We've got to use toxic. We've got to use the toxics. We've got invasive weeds. We've got invasive plants. We must kill them. We must have war. We've got to use the Roundup because, of course, we can't have the bird vetch or whatever it is spreading. And I really encourage you to take a deep breath and see if that's really true. Has anyone asked, what are the advantages and benefits of dandelion? Or what is it telling us? What is bird vetch providing? Are there medicines that can be derived? Can we run some goats through and do just as well? Can my friend bring over his or her goats and clean out an area much better and have a lot of fun at it? Through the eyes of nature, there's really no such thing as bad weeds, bad bugs. It's just things are out of balance and we see the problems. There's some interesting books giving us a different perspective about this invasive stuff. I've been learning this from Janice Schofield that invasive weeds are telling us a message. Sometimes they are about 6 weeks to 2 years ahead of a disease. They'll show up in an area. We say, wow, what's that new plant? Better kill it. And it's just the thing we need for a new variant on a virus or a bacteria or an Epstein-Barr virus that we need. So you plant and animal communicators, ask, what are your benefits? Are you telling us a message? How can we best use you? How can we best work with you? How do we use you to help our species advance? And thank you. So, I thank you. We have talked about soil health, we've talked about crop rotation, proper watering, interplanting, mixing it up. We've talked about air spacing and ventilation, monitoring and observe. There's disease-resistant varieties that are in the catalogs. There's biodiversity to help us with our overall balance, and there's barriers and traps. So observe, take a deep breath, inspect, monitor, identify, take another deep breath, and treat if you must. And watch out for pest panic and the predator advertisers. And here's some good books to consider. And remember your pest scout. So write down the number 745-3478 for our area. And I'm sorry I don't have it for the other cooperative extension offices, but there's Janice in Kenai Soldotna, and I don't know who's in the Fairbanks area. There's lots of learning, and there's lots of learning from you and even the Fintorn Garden and so forth, and ask Mother Nature by, what? Oh, that's me. And locally we have the Alaska Community Action on Toxics that's working very hard to get all this toxic stuff out of our environment so we can have healthy babies and healthy kids and have healthy lives. I want to thank you so much for being part of this, and I will stick around if you have last questions. This was a lot, and it's much to your credit for being so eager to learn on this beautiful day. So
we have a
thanks.
lot of people saying thank you. Beautiful reminders to work in cooperation with nature and helpful tips. Dan even said, so excited to try everything in my garden, even looking forward to seeing an aphid. Thanks so much. I could listen to you all day. Thank
Oh
you.
my goodness.
A lot of thank yous. So it sounds like you gave them all of the information they needed.
Ooh, those are very nice compliments. Thank you.
A lot more thank yous pouring in. Liz is asking, do you teach or present elsewhere in town?
Yes. If you would like to sign up, you could be a receiver of an occasional email about classes that are coming up and opportunities and conferences. GoodEarthGardenSchool.com, and you just put yourself on the email list.
All right. Do we have any last minute questions? All right, I don't see anything else coming through, so it looks like we're good to go. Ellie, thank you so much again for teaching the class. For everybody who joined in, we did record this class, so once we get it downloaded and uploaded onto our YouTube channel, we send everybody out that link. You're more than welcome to share it with other people that you might know that needs this helpful information. At the end, we do keep those private just to kind of make it a little bit of an incentive for people who do sign up for the classes, but towards the end of the garden season, I think we're going to make all of those public for everybody, but feel free to definitely share that link once you get it, because we encourage people to learn, and Ellie's a great teacher.
Oh, Brooke, that's wonderful. Thank you so much to all of you at Alaska Mill and Feed for making these classes possible. They're just a wonderful opportunity for us, and that we can go back and watch them again.
It's our pleasure. Well, thank you so much, Ellie, and have a wonderful afternoon.
Brooke, I have a quick question for you.
Yes.
What composters, compost bins are you selling right now?
I did see that email when I was in this class. So let me see what we have available right now. I know we're waiting for some to come in.
Mm-hmm.
We've got some Miracle Grow composters that come in 28 gallon, 48 gallon, and 56 gallon. But those are all tumbling composters. There our compost bin, it looks like, just a second. I don't see that one on order. I know we're having issues getting them in. A lot of our distributors are sold out. Yeah, so that's the problem we've been running into. So I know those tumbling ones are coming in. They were on their way up here a couple weeks ago, so they should be arriving any day now.
Yeah, I've never heard of anybody happy with a tumbler.
That's not good. Yeah, we sold through a lot of those composter eco squares by Good Ideas. Those are the kind of stand in place ones, but it looks like those are the ones that we don't have on order.
Well, that's all right. They were flimsy. They were less than desirable. And my favorite is still the Earth Machine, but they may be hard to get.
Yeah. But that is all I have.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Very good.
And have a wonderful afternoon.
All right. Happy gardening, y'all.
Yes.
Bye-bye.